Should be right now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Winner Week podcast. You're with your host, Julian Lee here today. I'm joined by the fantastic Andrea Wilson Woods. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Julian, thank you so much for having me.
And we're going to talk about the C word today, which is kind of like it kind of is a word that it has an emotional response to it. And when people see it, they go, oh, I don't want to read about that unless they are touched by that particular thing. We're talking about cancer, but we're talking about, Andrea's association with that and some of the really cool things she's doing around that topic. So bear with me. I think you're going to get a lot out of this. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, so we're going to talk quickly about what, how you came to become a kind of specialist in this kind of dreadful topic, but it's a topic that touches all of us. And
Yeah.
tell us a bit about your story with your sister and everything, Andrea.
Yeah. So I have lost six family members to five different cancers. And the most significant by far was my sister. So when I was 22, I was living in Los Angeles and I got custody of my then 8-year-old sister, Adrian. I was her legal guardian. I raised her all through my 20s until she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer 1 month after her 15th birthday, just as she was finishing her first year of high school. And it was a devastating diagnosis. The day before she had been fine, so it was very, very sudden. And it's the day she felt pain was the day an ER doctor told us that she had tumors in her liver and lungs, and she was starting chemotherapy less than a week later. So it was very fast. I tell people you have no idea how fast your life can change until it does, and that's what happened to us. And that was 20 years ago, and there was absolutely nothing they could do for metastatic liver cancer. And I look back now and feel like what we did was a waste of time, and actually probably hurt her more than it ever helped her. So she only lived 147 days with that diagnosis. And to give people who are watching some perspective, your listeners as well, the following year I turned 30 years old. So it changed the whole course of my life. I ended up starting a nonprofit dedicated to the very specific type of liver cancer that killed my sister. And while I was raising my sister, I was a teacher and I became a certified coach. So I've been coaching patients and caregivers pro bono for over a decade. And it really just got to this point where I found it unsustainable, just me, myself, and I. Like I wasn't scalable, but I realized that patients and caregivers needed more than just information. They needed more than just a brochure. Even though I knew that we had great patient education materials in layman's terms in multiple languages, and of course, free, we ship worldwide for free. The problem was, it's one thing to give someone materials, it's another to teach them what to do and how to use those materials. And I just wanted to solve this problem. And I kept thinking about my own situation where, I was asked to make major decisions about my sister's treatment less than 48 hours after getting that
Mm,
news from an ER doctor. And my head was spinning. It was just totally spinning. And everybody was speaking in acronyms. And so
mm.
I call it the alphabet soup of cancer. And I realized for me, it was like going back to school. So I had this crazy idea for Cancer University, and my friend told me about this international entrepreneurial competition called the Astellas C3 Prize, and it's sponsored by the pharmaceutical company Astellas. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to see if this crazy idea has any merit. And so I threw together a web page, and literally that was all I had was a web page. I entered this competition and kind of forgot about it. I didn't know if it would go anywhere. And I ended up that year, out of over 160 entries from 21 countries, I got in the top 10. So I made the semifinals. I talked to the Estellas executives. They loved it. And that gave me the motivation to really move forward. I found a co founder who has a very different skill set than I have, which is so important. And we have been bootstrapping the business, and now we're raising a seed round. But that's where Cancer University came from.
Incredible, Andrea. And I guess the motivation, it really sort of, I feel I guess it comes from that helplessness that you felt when your sister had been dealt that shocking news, and you're thinking, there must be a way for me to help. It can't just be all over, and then you're searching for the information and you're overwhelmed. And I guess that's kind of the fire that sets you down this path, isn't it, Andrea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought I asked all the right questions when my sister was diagnosed, and I can easily say now I didn't. There were so many more questions I could have asked, so many other decisions I could have made and would have and I would make differently today. And that's why it's so critical to get people at that moment of diagnosis, because if you have a situation like my sister where it is advanced and the patient is in pain, doctors tend to move very fast and you
Mm.
feel like you don't have other options. And I've heard from so many patients how they wish they had just taken their time. They wish they had just taken a couple more weeks to get a second opinion. They wish they hadn't just said, "Okay, yes, treatment, let's go." And that's what I want, is to really help people, meet them at that moment of diagnosis and help them make better decisions, and help them realize that the power is within them to make the decisions. It's not the doctor's decision, it's their decision.
There's like a disconnect with medicine, and where you've got a problem. This is because I had this. I mean, it's just such a minor problem, but it was like, I guess I call it a bit of a traumatic surgery. And
Okay.
and so you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, right, we'll do this, we'll do the surgery, and then it's just like, oh, okay, well, you're the doctor. You go along with it, and then you go and go through all of this. And I guess they don't let you know that there's going to be a lot of sort of suffering and pain. And I guess that's where, you know, your experience with your sister, they say, look, this is, you do the chemo, you do the whatever, the surgery, but it's not really weighed up against the, I guess, is it needed? I mean, is it even going to do anything? And is it going to increase suffering? They don't really let you know any of that, do they, Andrea?
Yeah. No, they don't. And what I think is so interesting is that if you ask doctors what they would do in the same situation, it is often completely different than what they are telling or advising their patients to do.
Yes, well, that's a problem. So if they're saying,
Yeah.
well, this is the medical advice, but if it was my daughter, I would recommend this.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah. So what would you have done differently? Because you didn't know, and your head was spinning. And I mean, hopefully, I mean, I'm sure you probably went through a period where you blamed yourself for things you theoretically thought you should have known and been able to do, which we always do in these situations. But hopefully, you didn't. What would you have done differently with your
Um,
sister's case?
I would not have started chemo right away. As soon as I knew, and I knew pretty early on, so we went to Children's Hospital Los Angeles. That's where the ambulance sent us. And that was appropriate on the surface, but my sister had a very adult cancer, for lack of a better word. She didn't have a pediatric cancer. So the oncologist who was assigned to her had not treated very many cases of her cancer. So if I could go back in time, I would say, let's get her pain under control while I get her transferred to UCLA or USC or City of Hope. All three of those cancer centers in Southern California would have been appropriate. Instead, we ended up diving into that first round of chemo. I worked on getting a second opinion, and by the time I got a second opinion, by the time I got the insurance to approve the transfer to UCLA, she had already done 4 rounds of chemo and it had just wrecked her immune system. It was horrible. So I finally did get her to UCLA, but it was almost too late at that point because she had lost so much weight and she lost 20% of her body weight, and and she had no immune system,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think it just did far more harm than good. And I would have started looking for a clinical trial immediately, even though it's gotten better. But back then, it was very difficult to get a 15-year-old, even a grown up 15-year-old who was taller than me. It was very hard to get a 15-year-old into a clinical trial. That has since gotten better.
Yeah, because then they're thinking, well, it's children. The clinical trials are kind of experimental. and they just have a blanket
Exactly.
rule. Let's let adults make the decision. Then, of course, you're there with this, need to get some help.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Right. So, now tell us about Cancer University and how. I guess we've got the people that are going to be using it, and then you've got some other stakeholders, which is kind of the industry. Tell us a bit
Yeah.
about how those two different kind of people have their needs met with this Cancer University startup. How does it work?
Yeah. Sure. So it's an online platform. It's for cancer patients and caregivers. They are the members, they are the end users. And the goal is to educate, empower, and engage them to become advocates for their cancer care, to improve outcomes and lower stress, and ultimately to reduce cost. And so we use courses, coaching, and community to bring all those elements together. So it really is this holistic online university style model. But we don't charge patients and caregivers. They are not, it's not like a direct to consumer product. It is a
I was
two-sided
wondering that.
marketplace. It's a
I was like,
two-sided, well, yeah,
yeah.
I have to say we've gotten pushback from investors, like a lot of investors, and it's just, it's like, I'm willing to die on that hill because I just know what it's like. I've been there, and I know what it's like to not have the money, and so we don't charge patients and caregivers. So it is a two-sided marketplace. We do have to actually pay for this. And so the customers, our first customer segment primarily is industry, as you refer to them. So industry is kind of this nebulous term that means pharmaceutical companies, biotech, medical device companies. And so for them, especially for pharmaceutical companies, they have a lot of issues with understanding the patient journey, designing patient friendly clinical trials, and then actually getting patients into their clinical trials. It's really sad because this is in the US. I don't know about Australia, right, where you are, but here in the US, 85% of patients, cancer patients, are seen in community cancer centers. And yet only 3% of those people go on to clinical trials. And that's just because a community cancer provider can't possibly know all the clinical trials that are available. It's just not possible. There are just so many. And so the onus really is on the patient. If they're not being seen at an NCI center by a specialist who might recommend a trial, the onus is on the patient and their family to seek out those trials if that's appropriate. And so that's why customers like pharmaceutical companies will pay to sponsor educational content, and ultimately pay for de-identified data.
This is brilliant, Andrea. This is starting to sound like an incredible idea. So you've got the person who has somebody in their family that has cancer, or they themselves have cancer, and they
Right.
need information. They are stressed out beyond whatever, and they're thinking, how do I access clinical trials? And you've got Cancer University; they can use it for free, so it's not going to, you're not profiteering off sick people, which was the thing
Correct.
that was in my head when we were talking about this. And I thought, how is this going to work? When you're trying to increase sales and you're going after people that are ill,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's
You
not
can't
that.
do it.
It's not that at all. And
Nope.
and then you've got the people who are, running the trials. You've got pharmaceutical companies who want to get feedback from people,
Yep.
and they are willing to pay Cancer University to, communicate with
Yeah.
people that are going through cancer. So this is incredible. Nobody's done this, have they, Andrea?
Nothing quite like this. No, no. Our competitors tend to have one of the components that we have. There are a lot of online communities for sure, but they don't have all three in this style and this model.
And they don't have you, who has gone
No,
through has gone through it. So you're coming
thank
from a
you.
place of true service where you want to
Yeah,
actually help and do something about this.
I
Wow,
do. It's
fantastic. So
one of my core values, service. Yeah.
it's what you're all about, I can tell. So that's fantastic, Andrea. And if you are, touched by cancer, I guess, and we all have been in some way, and you're looking for some information, have a look at what Andrea's doing. So there's cancer.university, and there's also, is it andreawilsonwoods.com?
Yeah, that's my main website. Yeah.
Yeah, so go and check out what Andrea's doing, and that's fantastic. Thanks for coming on, Andrea. That was an amazing episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So I'm going to produce some information about this, but I'm a little bit behind, but it'll be on the blog in a couple of weeks. And I'd like to thank you for coming on, Andrea, and thanks for listening and watching, everyone. I'll see you very soon on another episode. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, if I end this,